Overnight, Marriott and Colton replaced the A&W barrel with a prefabricated glass front bearing their new name. Then they installed a steam table behind the counter. They couldn't afford to lose even a day's business. They named it the Hot Shop, adding the extra P and E for what they thought was class. Marriott wanted to serve something novel. In cold weather, the spicier the better.
We made Mexican tamales, and first we made California tamales. They were great big round tamales.
And corn
a lot
shucks.
of cornmeal and corn shucks. And then the Mexican embassy people came over to see us to eat our tamales, and they didn't like those California tamales, so they showed us how to make the little round tamales. We served 3 of those at a time.
When the hot shop concept was started, there was a crying need for inexpensive, fast service, ready-to-eat foods that wasn't available as readily as it is today.
Marriott was a hands-on operator. Hot Shop employees called him the Big Tamale, and they trembled at his white glove inspections.
He'd make these visits. It was never with appointments or anything or any advance notice. He would just show up, and the tom-toms would start beating. It was really funny to watch this, how close they kept track of his whereabouts, where he was going, what the likelihood he was going to be one of the hot shops in the next 5 or 10 minutes.
We'd ride around every day, all the shops, and then we'd have dinner in one of them, and then we'd start riding around again, and we'd stay out until about 2 o'clock in the morning to check up on everything.
Marriott reduced everything to a written standard operating procedure, one everyone had to adhere to. He focused on everything from the preparation of salad to proper attire. Some say he ran his company like the Marine Corps.
They'd line waitresses up before every meal and check to see if their shoes were shined and their uniforms were starched and their aprons were starched, and they had hairnets on. They didn't have too much makeup, and they had very little jewelry, and they couldn't use nail polish, and their seams and their stockings were straight back in the 30s, and all those things that had to be just right, or they couldn't work that day. They had to go clean up their act.
Marriott always looked for new ways to improve his company. Sometimes that meant borrowing a good idea from a competitor. He figured an untapped source of revenue was the lot at his new orange and black Hot Shop number 3. If he could get cars onto the lot, he could serve customers inside their cars like they were doing at a restaurant out west. Legally, drivers could only park on the street. But in 1929, with a permit from the Washington, D.C. commissioner, Marriott removed the curb, creating a driveway onto his lot, and East Coast drive-in service began.
They had a big megaphone on the roof, and they'd call Kerber number 5 to pick up his order, or Kerber number 3 to pick up his order, and they were running trays, and these Kerbers were making a lot of money.
The running boy became the Hot Shop symbol. Kerbers, who wore the running boy patch on their sleeve, ran food to customers on a newfangled tray with a fold-up bracket that clamped to the top of a closed car door. Patrons loved it. About this time, Sterling Colton's father, Hugh, asked to be bought out of the hot shops.
He sold his half interest in what was to become Marriott Corporation for $5,000. You can see which one of those two were the real businessmen at that time.
With Hugh Colton no longer a partner, J. Willard Marriott now owned the 3 hot shops free and clear. And the Great Depression of 1929 did nothing to stop his company's growth. In the face of breadlines and bank failures, his business thrived. Because Marriott sold so much food, he could keep prices down. J. Willard Marriott was known for his fairness to employees, but felt the time had come to ensure their loyalty. As a precautionary measure, he instituted a paternalistic family corporate culture.
I find that people don't just work for money. They work at a place where they're treated right and where they feel that they're accomplishing something.
Hot shops were open 24 hours a day in 1937, employed 2,000 people, and grossed $3 million. Near Hoover National Airport, the current site of the Pentagon, sat Hot Shop 8. Marriott observed that passengers booked on domestic flights were driving first to number 8 for a boxed lunch to eat aboard the DC-3s. A genius at finding a need and filling it, Marriott decided to pre-box meals and sell them directly to the airlines. Sky Girls served the hot shop food in flight. Eddie Rickenbacher's Eastern Air Transport was his first customer.
He took the basement of this restaurant and turned it into an airline kitchen. And he took me over there when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and he was so proud, showed me all the shelves and all the tables all laid out here where they were putting box lunches together to sell to Eastern Airlines to put on the planes.
Within a year, Hot Shop 8 serviced 22 daily flights departing Hoover Airport.
Marriott's diversification into the in-flight business was a logical extension from its restaurant operations. It was a business they understood, the business of making, or as we say, manufacturing meals in small containers, fast and at a good price.
He was tough on his brothers and on me and my brother, harder on his family members than he was on the rest of the people in the company. He was an absolute perfectionist. He was never satisfied in anything that he ever saw or ever did. There was a constant frustration to me and to other people who worked for him that we could never satisfy him.
The hot shops of the 40s were complicated operations. Anything you could eat in the restaurant, you could order to take out.
He'd take Bill and me with him, and he'd do the inspections of the restaurants and check under every piece of equipment, make sure there was no dirt anywhere, and that's when we spent most of our time with him.
It was clear Marriott was grooming his young sons for a future in the business. Like his father before him, he had set a high benchmark of excellence, one that Bill and Richard would spend a lifetime trying to reach. Marriott owned a summer home in New Hampshire. He would take vacations, but when he worked like a dog. When World War II ended in 1945, prosperity returned and customers flooded the hot shops. There was little time left for Allie and the boys. Marriott believed that no person can get very far in this life working only 40 hours a week. By 1952, J. Willard Marriott's little root beer stand had grown to 45 restaurants, serving 30 million customers a year. But certain employees could only work in the back of the restaurant.
The soda fountain, you know, is in the kitchen, like the kitchen part of the store, not the dining room. Blacks that worked in the dining room was bus help to clean the tables back then. Sometimes, you know, like they were busy. I have went out in the dining room, like I was young then, so I went out in the dining room to help them bus the tables, but you couldn't serve those tables. You couldn't serve those people, but you could clean the tables.
You've got to give the company credit for employing a lot of the women and minorities when that wasn't in vogue at the time, especially in a business where you serve a lot of white customers, which is controversial, and yet they were able to give them jobs but not give them equal respect.
Although the Supreme Court outlawed segregation in Washington restaurants in 1953, black customers of the Virginia hot shops were not served until 1960. That year, J. Willard Marriott was the first restaurant chain owner to break the color bar in that state. Then, after 30 years in the food business, Marriott would risk a new venture. He would enter the hospitality industry and open his first motor hotel. 30 years had passed since J. Willard Marriott opened his 9-stool root beer stand on 14th Street in Washington, D.C. His dedication to good food at a fair price, while still turning a profit, laid the foundation for his next move. In 1957, at age 57, Marriott built and opened his first motel, the Twin Bridges.
There were 40,000 people working in the Pentagon and bringing people from all over the world there. And the airport, within 5 minutes from us, was an ideal location for a hotel.
With a $7 million price tag, the 370-bed Twin Bridges was the largest motel in the world. But financing the hotel put Marriott in debt.